There was a SpongeBob episode that I watched as a kid, and then I never watched it again until I was older. I think I was about 5 years old when I watched this episode, and I felt like it was different from the other episodes of SpongeBob. It was darker, and for some reason, something about it just felt familiar. But everything felt out of place in it, and at one point, I wasn't sure if this was a real SpongeBob episode or if it was just a dream I had had. I remember as a child, my dad brought some of the seasons of SpongeBob on streaming services. One season we didn't have for a while was season 1. A couple of years ago, we did get access to all the SpongeBob seasons that had been made, and I just binged them all. But it did mean that I watched season 1 again, and I think season 1 is just one of my favourite SpongeBob seasons. But while watching it, I found it. Rock Bottom. This is the episode that I had been searching for all this time. I remember as a child my dad worked full time, so I've spent most of the day with my mum. And my mum never learnt to drive, so we relied quite heavily on public transport. Most of the time it wasn't a problem, but occasionally buses would get delayed or just fully cancelled. I remember just one specific time it was raining and we were at the bus stop, and we waited until the scheduled time for the bus to come. But for some reason it just didn't come, and I was thinking that it was just late. But then half an hour went by and it was apparent at that point that the bus just had been cancelled. So we had to just wait until the next bus. Luckily for us, they were scheduled for every hour, but I still didn't enjoy waiting in the rain. So I do understand the frustration of waiting in a not so ideal situation. It was hard to watch SpongeBob wait for the bus because it just brought back all these emotions and frustration I had also felt. And I really hate that feeling of uncertainty, not knowing when the situation will end or how it will resolve itself. And I really, really hate that feeling. But on the other hand, let's look at the positive. Nothing builds character more than standing in the rain at the bus stop thinking, will my bus ever come? Rock Bottom doesn't feel like a place you're meant to go. It's the type of place you just end up accidentally when you're lost somewhere. The moment SpongeBob arrives, you can tell it's different. There's bright yellows, dark blues, and deep purples. The lighting is very dark and murky, and it definitely feels like you're at the bottom of the ocean. I remember as a kid I was fascinated by the deep sea, the same way I was fascinated about outer space. I used to watch Octonauts, and I loved the episodes where they went to the deep sea. There was something quite comforting about how quiet and distant everything felt down there. Things moved more slowly, and you were far away from the surface, which was full of life and really bright. It was calm and almost safe down there. Rock Bottom should have that same feeling, but for some reason it doesn't. Unlike other episodes of SpongeBob, there's no definite villain. The situation is kind of the villain, and the characters just kind of add to it. They're just different, they move differently, speak differently, but it feels like everyone down there understands how it works. But SpongeBob doesn't. He's just like an alien in this place. And I think it's very unsettling. It's not actually dangerous. No one's trying to harm him. But it is very unwelcoming in the way SpongeBob is used to. There's a feeling of distance, and the bus stop feels really isolated, and everything he does to try and leave doesn't work. This was very different for me. I think, I had the feeling of calm and reassurance when I thought about the deep sea, but this was just completely different. Other SpongeBob episodes happen in the same familiar settings. There is the pineapple SpongeBob lives in, there's the Krusty Krab he works in, there's the driving school, there's Sandy's tree dome. It's all familiar and he knows the situation, he knows the scene. But this is new and completely different. I think this is one of the most memorable places that SpongeBob's ever been. Usually SpongeBob is really annoying and loud. He's usually causing some kind of issues in the episode. But in this episode, he just acts completely differently. He's quite quiet and unsure of himself, which we haven't really seen before. He tries to fit in and work out how things work. He really, really tries to adapt to the situation. Like when he tries to understand the bathrooms, or he tries to put on an accent to fit in. But despite his efforts, everything he does is still wrong. No one really explains anything to him, and they just kind of expect him to figure it out himself and just understand how this place works. I think watching this as an adult, this part really stood out to me. To me, this kind of describes things that I've felt. And I grew up without a diagnosis for autism. And I think a lot of these feelings are very familiar to me. Struggling to communicate, struggling to connect with others, and not really understanding things that just seemed normal to others. And I never really understood why I find it so hard. Rock Bottom is kind of like a visual representation of that experience. I think the bus stop is one of the most frustrating parts. But I do also love what they did with this scene. The bus arrives, SpongeBob starts to get hopeful that he can finally leave, and then it just rushes off before he can get on. And this cycle just repeats itself over and over again. He gets so close, almost close enough to taste freedom, and then it's just taken away from him. I think the worst part of it is the feeling of not having any control over the situation. I really hate not having any control over a situation I'm in. I do best when I'm within the safety of routine. And buses are meant to be orderly and in a set routine. And it's fine if it's a few minutes late, but the way the buses work in Rock Bottom just seems to lack routine and doesn't seem very logical at all. And yet, despite all of this, Rock Bottom is strangely comforting. SpongeBob never stops being SpongeBob. He doesn't become bitter, he doesn't give up on trying to be kind, and he doesn't change who he is just to fit in. And eventually, through his patience, the situation resolves itself, and he ends up making it home. Rewatching this episode is different as an adult. It's no longer unsettling, but it is quite validating, and I don't really think I'm alone in that. It's quite comforting to watch a character who feels out of sync with the world, and I think it explains my experience in life really well. Rock Bottom never gets explained to us, but SpongeBob was able to leave and go back to the place he was familiar with. I think this kind of is why it's so memorable. We never got an explanation for it. We never learned how things worked or why they were that way. And I still have a lot of questions about that place. But I don't think I want them answered. If the show were to answer it, it would take away from it, I think. I just don't think it would be the same if we understood it. The episode is perfect just the way it is, in its little bubble, and it doesn't need anything more added to it. And I do think it's really quite funny that as a child, I questioned whether or not this was even real. Because for a long time, I just thought this was like a dream I had had about SpongeBob, and, that it wasn't an actual episode. But it's true that this isn't a regular SpongeBob episode. So if this episode stuck with you too, maybe now you know why. And if you're watching this while waiting for a bus, I really hope it does stop for you.